The barn smelled of dust and lilac perfume that couldn't hide the scent of sweat. Lanterns hung from rafters, their light trembling against beams worn smooth by years of dances and gossip. June Avery stood at the edge of the floor, her gloved hands folded tight around a cup of lemonade gone warm. She had stitched half the gowns, spinning under the lantern glow, yet no one noticed the seamstress when she wasn't behind a needle. Laughter rippled from a knot of women near the punch bowl. "She sews beauty into cloth," one of them whispered, "but can't spare a stitch for herself." The others giggled behind painted fans. June lowered her eyes. The music of the fiddle wavered. She had come only because Mrs. Pratt insisted, said she needed air, that a girl of 24 ought not hide forever. June wasn't hiding. She just never belonged where mirrors glimmered and tongues cut deep. Across the room, Rowan Tate leaned against a post, hat in hand, boots powdered with trail dust. He'd ridden in from his ranch at sunset, more for supplies than company, but he'd been pulled toward the dance hall by habit and noise, the way a tired man sometimes wanders toward light, just to remember the shape of laughter. He noticed her before he knew why. The plain girl by the lemonade table, shoulders drawn like she was shrinking from the air itself. Her dress was simple gray cotton, neatly mended at the cuffs, no ribbons, no shine. But her stillness had gravity, quiet as a river pool where wild things come to drink. A young man, red-faced with whiskey, swaggered toward her. "You save all your smiles for the thread, Miss Avery," he jeered. "Maybe that's why no man's asked you to dance." The room hushed just enough for the cruelty to land. June's throat burned. She didn't answer, didn't move. Rowan straightened from the post. His boots thudded against the plank floor as he crossed the space. "Maybe the problem ain't her smile," he said evenly, "but the company asking." The laughter broke off. The drunk's grin faltered. Rowan's shadow fell long beside June. He tipped his hat slightly toward her. "Evening, ma'am. Would you allow me a dance?" June's fingers trembled around the cup. She wanted to vanish, but something in his tone, steady, almost apologetic, gave her courage enough to nod. He guided her to the edge of the floor. The fiddle struck up again. Rowan's hand was warm and calloused, his steps careful as if afraid of breaking her. June tried to follow, counting silently, focusing on the rhythm so she wouldn't hear the whispers. When the song ended, he bowed slightly. "Thank you, Miss Avery," she curtsied, voice barely above a breath. "Thank you, Mr. Tate." The silence between them was awkward, but not cruel. He offered to fetch her fresh lemonade, but she shook her head. He nodded once, understanding more than he said, and walked away. By the time she left the dance, the moon was high. Laughter still spilled from the barn, but she walked home alone along the dusty lane. Each step echoed faintly between cottonwoods. Behind her, two men loitered near the hitching posts. One muttered, "Did you see Tate dancin' with the seamstress?" The other snorted, "Reckon she'll be patching his shirts next," trying to patch her way into his name. The words carried through the night like burrs on the wind, small but sharp. June didn't turn back. She kept walking, her shawl drawn close. In her quiet chest something ached, not from shame this time, but from the strange warmth of a man's kindness she hadn't expected. And far behind her, Rowan stood outside the barn, hat in hand again, looking down the road where she'd gone. He didn't know why he cared, only that the laughter from inside sounded meaner now that she wasn't there to bear it. The next morning broke pale and windless. Dust floated through the sunlight that cut across June's sewing table. A line of half-finished dresses waited beside her like silent witnesses. Her fingers moved by habit, drawing neat stitches, but her mind kept drifting to the barn, the music, and the man who'd stepped between her and humiliation. Rowan Tate. She had heard of him, of course. Everyone in town had. A rancher who'd built his spread with his own two hands, lost half his herd in last year's drought and never took charity. They said he was proud, quiet, and kept mostly to his land. June wondered why such a man had bothered to help her. A knock sounded at her door, 3 firm taps. She froze, heart catching. Visitors were rare. When she opened it, Rowan stood there, hat in hand again. His hair was damp, as though he'd just washed trail dust from it. "Morning, Miss Avery," he said. Didn't mean to intrude. She blinked. "Mr. Tate? Did you forget something at the dance?" He smiled faintly. "Reckon I left with a thought I couldn't shake. My ranch hands tear through shirts faster than I can buy 'em. I wondered if you'd take the work." "You'd be paid fairly," June hesitated. She needed the money. Her rent was due and orders had been scarce since the dry spell ruined most weddings. But she could already imagine the gossip. June Avery sewing for the man who danced with her. Still, she nodded. "I'd be honored, Mr. Tate." His relief was quiet but real. "Good. I'll bring the cloth myself. You shouldn't have to walk out that far alone." He tipped his hat again and left her standing in the doorway with sunlight pooling at her feet. By noon, the town already knew. Mrs. Pratt stopped by with a loaf of bread and a look that carried more pity than kindness. "Folks are talking, dear," she murmured. "Say you found yourself a patron." June's needle stilled mid-stitch. "It's sewing work, nothing more." Mrs. Pratt sighed. "That's not how tongues work in this town." At dusk, Rowan arrived with a bundle of coarse linen and a few of his men's torn shirts. The ranch hands waited by the gate, whispering. One of them spat into the dirt. "Boss sure takes an interest in plain things," he muttered. Rowan didn't answer. He handed June the fabric and a small pouch of coins. "That's half up front," he said. "I don't," she began. He shook his head. "Fair's fair." Inside her small house, she unrolled the fabric after he left. The cloth smelled faintly of horses and sun. She brushed her fingers over it, then over the coins. Proof she'd earned something honest. Yet she couldn't stop hearing the laughter from the barn, or Mrs. Pratt's warning. The next few days passed in a blur of sewing and whispers. Men stopped outside her window, pretending to check their watches while gossiping in low tones. A few women canceled orders without explanation. By Friday, the story had grown teeth. In the general store, June overheard a pair of ranch wives. "Heard she's after his property. Lonely men fall easily." "She's clever with her hands," the other said. "Wouldn't surprise me if she's stitching her way into his will." June's throat tightened. She left her groceries on the counter and walked out before they could see her tears. That evening, Rowan came to collect the finished work. She handed him the bundle without meeting his eyes. "Good stitch work," he said, glancing over the seams. "Best I've seen." "Thank you," she whispered. He studied her for a moment, reading the strain in her face. "They're talking, aren't they?" She looked up sharply. "It doesn't matter." "It does." His tone was gentle but firm. "I didn't mean to make trouble for you." June's smile wavered. "You didn't. Trouble just finds women easier than men." He didn't argue. He only nodded once, then said quietly, "You ever need to breathe easier? There's open sky on my land." She wanted to tell him that kindness only made the whispers worse, but the words wouldn't come. When he left, she watched him ride into the twilight, the sound of hooves fading slowly, and though the evening wind was cool, her face still burned from shame she hadn't earned. By early summer, June's work had become a quiet rhythm, stitching by dawn, delivering by dusk, and avoiding the eyes that followed her. Yet her hands, though tired, never faltered. Each seam she made for Rowan's ranch brought a steadiness she hadn't felt in years. She mended torn sleeves, patched saddle blankets, and hemmed curtains for the bunkhouse. It wasn't much, but it felt honest, solid. When she visited the ranch one afternoon to drop off a bundle, the men were branding cattle in the lower field. Heat shimmered off the plain. Rowan was there, sleeves rolled up, arm roped with muscle and dust. He waved her over, eyes bright against the sun. "Miss Avery," he called. "You sure know how to make a man look respectable." "My foreman swears his shirt's too fine for work now." She smiled shyly. "It's only strong stitching, Mr. Tate." He looked at her for a long second, something unspoken softening the air between them. But the moment broke when his foreman, a grizzled man named Harlan, rode up. "Boss," Harlan said, lowering his voice, "you might want to mind your visits from town. Folks are talking more than usual." "I don't give a damn what they say," Rowan muttered. "Maybe you should," Harlan replied. "A rancher's name travels faster than his horse, and a woman's reputation doesn't survive half as far." Rowan's jaw tightened. June heard enough to understand. Her throat went dry, but she said nothing. That evening, while she packed her sewing into her satchel, a boy rode up from town with a letter. The envelope bore the seal of the local bank. Inside was a polite note from Mr. Edwin Cale, offering her a position more suitable to a woman's station at his office. Bookkeeping, he claimed, with better pay. But beneath the formality, the message felt oily, mocking. Everyone knew Edwin Cale had a hand in every rumor that slithered through town. June folded the letter and set it aside, unease pooling in her chest. The next day, she brought the shirts to the ranch. Rowan met her outside the barn. "Something wrong?" he asked, reading her face. She hesitated, then said quietly, "The banker offered me work." Rowan frowned. "Cale, he's not a man you want to trust. He's been sniffing after my land for years." June nodded, already knowing. "I worked for him once," she admitted. "A long time ago." He looked at her sharply, surprised. "Doing what?" "Keeping books," she said, eyes fixed on the ground. "Until I found numbers that didn't match." He waited. She didn't elaborate further, and he didn't press her. That night, Rowan found his foreman at the bunkhouse fire. "What's Cale got against her?" he asked. Harlan spat into the dirt. "Same thing he's got against any woman who knows too much. Best steer clear, boss. Cale's meaner than a trapped coyote when cornered." But Rowan couldn't shake the image of June standing under the cottonwoods, hands folded around her satchel, face lit by the last light of day, lonely, proud, and braver than folks gave her credit for. 2 mornings later, a deputy rode up to the ranch with questions. "You've taken on a new hand of sorts," he said with a smirk. "Heard she's helping with your papers, too." Rowan's brow furrowed. "You heard wrong," the deputy chuckled. "Maybe, but the bank says otherwise." When the man rode off, Rowan stared at the road for a long time. He knew lies when he smelled them, and now the stink was spreading fast. Meanwhile, June's landlord came knocking. "Town council's talking," he said gruffly. "Don't want any scandal tied to my property. You best be careful who you work for, Miss Avery." She closed the door after him and stood in the dim light, trembling. Her rent was due in a week. Work was drying up. Only the ranch still needed her, and she knew that if she quit now, the rumors would win. So she lit her lamp, drew her thread, and began stitching again, her hands steady even as her heart cracked under the weight of what people chose to believe. Outside, the wind rose across the plains, carrying with it the sound of distant thunder. Trouble was coming, and she could feel it in her bones. Rain came after weeks of dry wind, darkening the ground and soaking through the canvas roof of June's small house. She worked by lantern light, listening to the steady patter on the windows. The thread trembled in her fingers. Every time thunder cracked, she jumped a little. The knock on the door made her heart race. "Miss Avery?" It was Rowan, water dripping from his hat brim, his coat dark with rain. "Mr. Tate, what are you doing out in this weather?" she asked. He stepped inside only halfway, careful not to track mud across her floor. "Heard the sheriff came by your place today. Wanted to see if you were all right." June nodded faintly. He asked questions. "About you? About me working for you?" "What kind of questions?" "The kind that don't come from curiosity." Rowan swore softly under his breath. "That banker's stirring the pot." June looked up, the lamplight catching her pale face. "He's saying I forged papers, that I'm trying to cheat you somehow." Rowan's jaw tightened. "You'd never—" "I wouldn't," she said quickly, her voice shaking. "But people believe him. He has a way of turning lies into truth." He took a slow breath. "I'll handle it." June wanted to believe him, but she'd lived long enough to know that truth didn't always win. especially when men like Edwin Cale were the ones talking loudest. After Rowan left, she sat in silence, the rain muffling the world outside. On the table lay her sewing, half-finished, and beside it, the folded letter from Cal. She picked it up and stared at the neat handwriting. She had once admired his cleverness, before she learned what it cost. The next morning, she went to town to deliver the mended shirts. As she walked down the boardwalk, whispers followed her. A pair of men laughed under their breath. Got herself a rich fool to fool, one said. Another spat. Reckon she's playing the long game. Women like that always are. June kept walking. Her cheeks burned, but her steps didn't falter. She handed the shirts to Rowan at the smithy, where he was speaking with Harlan about a broken wagon wheel. He noticed the looks people gave her. You can drop these at the ranch next time, he said quietly. You don't have to come into town. She nodded, though the words stung. Hiding would only make the lies stronger, but she was tired. That evening at the saloon, Edwin Cale leaned on the bar, sipping whiskey and talking loud enough for all to hear. Tate's got himself a new accountant, he sneered. Pretty thing, too, if you like your coffee weak. Men laughed. Someone asked, Is that the seamstress? The one from the dance? Cale smirked. The same. I offered her honest work once. She refused. Guess she found a richer position. Rowan's foreman Harlan was there, listening in the corner. He rose from his seat and strode to the bar. You best mind your tongue, Cale, he said. Cale's grin didn't waver. Just truth, friend. No harm in truth. Then you and I ain't friends, Harlan said, and left before fists started flying. By nightfall, the rumors had doubled. The sheriff came again the next morning, this time to Rowan's ranch. Mr. Tate, he said, tipping his hat. We got talk of forged land deeds. Cale says there's been funny business with your boundaries. Says Miss Avery's behind it. Rowan's eyes went cold. You believe that? The sheriff shrugged. Ain't about belief. It's about checking the books. You got yours? In the barn, Rowan said. You can look all you like. The sheriff left empty-handed but uneasy. After he rode off, Rowan leaned against the fence, jaw tight. He'd fought drought, wolves, and rustlers, but gossip was worse. You couldn't shoot it, couldn't outrun it. And yet, when he thought of June's trembling hands and steady eyes, he knew he wouldn't let this stand. That night, lightning split the plains. Somewhere in town, a man drank to his own lies, and in her little house, June prayed silently not for rescue, but for the strength to face what was coming. Days turned heavy after that storm. The air itself felt full of eyes. June could feel them on her back whenever she stepped outside. Neighbors, shopkeepers, even the children who once waved now looked away. Work came more slowly. 2 orders were canceled in the same week. One woman sent a note that said only, "Circumstances changed." June read it twice before burning it in her stove. At the ranch, the men were restless. Gossip had crept even into the bunkhouse. One evening, while Rowan went over ledgers by lantern light, Harlan walked in. You know they're saying she's got you fooled, Harlan said bluntly, that she's planning to marry you for your land. Rowan didn't look up. Let 'em say it. Cale's making rounds with papers, Harlan continued. Claims you signed over rights without knowing it. That made Rowan look up. He what? Says she forged your name. Sheriff's listening. Bankers got charm, you don't. Rowan closed the ledger, eyes narrowing. Then it's time someone reminded this town what real proof looks like. He saddled his horse before dawn and rode into town. June was already up, sweeping the dust from her porch. She froze when she saw him. Mr. Tate. I'm not staying long, he said, breath still heavy from the ride. But I need to ask. Did you ever handle Cale's ledgers back when you worked for him? June hesitated. The truth was a knife she'd kept hidden for years. Yes, she said softly. I kept his books. Until I saw what he was doing. Rowan's brows furrowed. What was he doing? Changing numbers. Shifting money from the ranch loans into his own accounts. I told him I'd seen it. The next morning he said I'd made a mistake. Then word spread that I wasn't reliable. That's why you left town for a spell. She nodded. And why don't I keep ledgers anymore? Rowan leaned on the fence post, his face hard with understanding. Then all this, these lies, he's just trying to silence you again. June looked away. People won't believe me. They never did. I do, he said quietly. She met his gaze, startled by the certainty in it. Keep whatever proof you have, he said. We'll use it when the time comes. After he rode off, she went to her sewing chest, heart hammering. Beneath folded fabric and spools of thread lay an old tin box, locked and dusty. She hadn't touched it in years. Inside were pages, ledger copies she had made in secret before leaving the bank. Each one showed Cale's handwriting, the false entries she'd caught. She had kept them for truth's sake, though they had cost her everything. That evening, as she lit her lamp, she saw a figure outside, Cale himself. He stepped onto her porch with a polite smile. Miss Avery, he said, tipping his hat. I hear you've been busy lately. Stirring old memories, perhaps? Her throat went dry. I've done nothing wrong. Of course not, he said smoothly. But it'd be a shame if people thought otherwise. A woman alone can't afford more whispers, can she? June gripped the edge of the door. What do you want, Mr. Cale? To keep things peaceful, he said. You hand me whatever papers you might still have, and I'll see that your name stays clean. Refuse, he shrugged. Well, words travel fast, she said nothing. The rain had stopped, but the air was still damp, heavy with the smell of earth. Cale smiled again and tipped his hat. Think on it, Miss Avery. The truth's only worth something if people believe it. When he was gone, June locked her door and leaned against it, shaking. For the first time, she understood the danger clearly. Not just gossip, but power. Outside thunder rolled far off again, like a warning, and somewhere beyond the dark hills, Rowan Tate was riding hard through the night, unaware that the war for both their names had already begun. The morning came bright but cold, the kind of light that showed every flaw in the world. June hadn't slept. Cale's words still echoed in her ears. She made tea she didn't drink, then wrapped the tin box in an old shawl. The papers inside felt heavier than iron. By mid-morning, she saddled her mule and rode toward Rowan's ranch. The fields were gold with dry grass. When she arrived, Rowan was repairing a fence by the north pasture. He wiped sweat from his brow when he saw her. Miss Avery, he said, surprised. You all right? She climbed down slowly, clutching the bundle. I need to show you something. They went inside the barn, away from the men's eyes. Dust hung in the light, streaming through the slats. June set the wrapped bundle on a barrel and unfolded the shawl. Inside lay the tin box. Rowan frowned. What's that? Proof, she said quietly. Of everything. He opened the lid and drew out the ledgers, copies neat and careful. His eyes moved over the pages, then stopped. These are Cale's numbers. Yes, he borrowed money from ranchers like you, then moved it into his own name. When I found out, he said I'd misunderstood. The next day, he made sure everyone else thought I was the liar. Rowan looked up, his face a mix of anger and respect. You kept these all this time? She nodded. I thought I'd never need them again. I only wanted to work quietly and be left alone. He leaned back against the post, running a hand through his hair. If we bring this to the sheriff, it might finally end his lies. June hesitated. Or make them worse. He's powerful, Mr. Tate. He'll twist even this against us. Maybe. But it's still the truth. They stood in silence, listening to the creak of the barn beams and the wind through the grass. Finally, June said, If you want these, take them. I trust you. He stared at her, startled. You trust me? Yes. You're the only one who hasn't treated me like I'm something to laugh at. He took the box gently, setting it aside. Then I'll see this through. That night, word spread fast that Rowan Tate had gone to the sheriff with papers against Edwin Cale. Some said it was about land. Others claimed it was about a woman. By morning, Cale himself was storming through town, coat flapping, voice sharp. She's a thief, he shouted at the saloon door. She stole those ledgers years ago. People gathered, hungry for scandal. Mrs. Pratt was among them. "I don't believe it," she said, but her voice wavered. Cale saw that and pressed harder. "Ask yourself, what kind of woman hides in plain sight waiting for the right man to ruin?" "She's clever, that one. Too clever." By noon, June's house had been pelted with stones. A window cracked. Someone left a note on her porch. "Go back where you came from." She swept the glass with shaking hands and sat down hard on her chair, staring at her needlework. The quiet felt heavier than the noise. Late that night, a knock sounded again. One slow, one quick. She froze, then opened the door a crack. Rowan stood there, hat in hand. "Sheriff believes me," he said. "He's looking into it." But Cale's got half the town scared. She stepped back to let him in. His coat was cold from the wind. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. "They'll see. Let 'em," he said simply. "You're not fighting this alone." Her eyes stung. For once, she didn't hide it. Outside, the night stretched wide and still. A coyote cried far off. Inside, the lamplight flickered over two tired souls bound by the same wound. Truth twisted by pride. Rowan looked at her, his voice low. "We'll clear your name, June, I swear it." And for the first time in years, she almost believed someone's promise. The next few days turned harsh. The wind carried dust and gossip through every doorway in town. June could feel eyes on her wherever she went. The blacksmith's wife pausing mid-sentence, the store clerk pretending not to stare. When she walked to the post office, two boys whispered behind her. "That's the one said. "The woman who fooled Mr. Tate." She kept her head down, clutching her parcel of thread and cloth. The shame pressed like a weight on her chest. That evening, she found the church empty but for the smell of candle wax and the faint echo of a hymn. She sat in the back pew, the same place she'd sat every Sunday since she came to town. "Lord," she whispered, voice trembling. "You know I only told the truth. Why does it always cost so much to do what's right?" Her hands twisted the edge of her shawl until she felt the cloth strain. Footsteps creaked down the aisle. She turned and saw Mrs. Pratt, her face soft in the lamplight. "I thought you might be here," the older woman said. "There's talk, June, ugly talk. But I know that the ledger wasn't stolen. I've known Cale too long not to see what he's capable of." June blinked fast, trying not to cry. "Thank you. That means more than you know." Mrs. Pratt laid a hand on her shoulder. "Don't lose heart, dear. The truth's like spring. It takes its time, but it always breaks through." The door opened again. Rowan stepped in, his boots heavy on the wooden floor. "June," he said quietly, "the sheriff wants you to testify tomorrow. He found enough in those papers to start an inquiry." She froze. "Testify? It's the only way to shut Cale down for good. But it won't be easy." Her heart pounded. "They already think I'm a liar. What difference will standing in front of them make?" "A big one," he said. "Because this time I'll be standing beside you." The next morning, the small courthouse was filled with townsfolk. Men leaned on the walls, women whispered in the back rows. The air buzzed with the smell of sweat and tension. Cale sat at the front, all confidence and polish. His lawyer spoke fast, tossing words like false evidence and forged signatures. Then came June's turn. She walked to the front, skirts brushing the floorboards, hands shaking slightly. Rowan caught her eye as she passed. Steady, silent encouragement. She stood behind the wooden rail, the sunlight catching the dust in the air. "Miss Avery," the sheriff said, "tell us what you found." She lifted her chin. "I was a bookkeeper for Mr. Cale 3 years ago. He moved money from ranch accounts into his own. I copied the records because I feared he'd destroy them." The lawyer snorted. "A seamstress keeping ledgers? Convenient memory." Her voice didn't waver. "I wasn't a seamstress then. I became one when his lies ruined my name." A murmur rippled through the room. Cale's smile faltered. "She's bitter, that's all." "A woman scorned." June turned to him, eyes clear. "I'm not bitter, Mr. Cale, I'm tired." "There's a difference." The room went still. Rowan stepped forward, hat in hand. "Sheriff." I can confirm every number she showed me matches my own ranch records. If she wanted to trap me or steal from me, she'd have had plenty of chances. She didn't. She's got more honor than half this town combined. The sheriff nodded slowly. We'll verify every document. By evening, the hearing ended. Cale left red-faced, muttering threats. The crowd scattered, half believing June, half still uncertain. Outside the courthouse, June stood under the bare-limbed cottonwoods. The wind lifted her hair, and for once she didn't lower her head. Rowan came to her side. You did well, he said. Her voice was soft. It's not over. No, he agreed. But it's turning. They walked back toward town in silence. Somewhere far off, thunder grumbled across the plains, a promise of rain after too long a drought. The next morning came gray and still, the kind of quiet that makes folks hold their breath. June awoke before dawn, the sound of distant hoofbeats echoing across the hills. She rose and stepped outside. The sky hung heavy with clouds. Down the ridge, a rider was coming fast. Deputy Mason, dust streaked on his coat. He swung down from his horse and met Rowan near the barn. Cale tried to flee at sunrise, Mason said, headed toward the border with half the town's loan money in his saddlebag. The sheriff caught up to him near the river. He's in custody now. Rowan let out a breath he'd been holding. So it's over. Mason nodded. Almost. Folks are gathering in the square. Sheriff wants to set the record straight in front of everyone. June stood at the doorway, her hands tight around the frame. He wants me there too, doesn't he? Rowan turned to her, quiet but certain. You started this truth, June. You should see it finished. By mid-morning, the whole town was gathered by the courthouse steps. The sheriff stood tall, reading from a paper, his voice carrying over the restless crowd. It's been proven that Mr. Cale Harper falsified ledgers, forged names, and stole funds from local ranchers. The evidence came from Miss June Avery, who kept records at great personal cost. She is hereby cleared of all suspicion. A hush fell. The words hung in the cold air like a church bell's echo. Then someone began to clap, softly, hesitantly. It was Mrs. Pratt. Then another joined. Then another. Soon the sound rolled through the square until it filled the air like rain on dry earth. June didn't move. She just stared at the ground, tears slipping down her cheeks. Rowan stepped beside her, his hand brushing hers, a quiet question. She didn't pull away. Cale shouted from the wagon where he sat in irons. You'll regret this, both of you. You think the town will forget? You think you're heroes? The sheriff gave the signal and the horses pulled the wagon forward. The rattling wheels faded down the road until the sound was gone. When the crowd began to thin, June found herself standing near the old oak by the general store. Mrs. Pratt came over, smiling through damp eyes. I told you, dear. Truth always breaks through. June nodded, voice thick. It doesn't feel like victory. It just feels quiet. That's how peace sounds sometimes, Mrs. Pratt said. Rowan joined them, hat in hand. June, I owe you more than thanks. You saved my ranch and a good many others. You could have run, but you stayed. She met his eyes. I stayed because I was tired of running from what's right. He smiled faintly. You remind me of my mother. She used to say strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's the voice that says one more day. The wind picked up, carrying away the last bits of dust and gossip alike. The clouds that had hung heavy all week began to open, and the first drops of rain fell soft as mercy. The ranch hands who'd once doubted June tipped their hats as she passed. Even the store clerk gave her a quiet nod. By the time the rain fell steadily, the town's mood had shifted. The lies had washed away, leaving something cleaner behind. That evening, back at the ranch, June hung her damp shawl by the stove. The smell of coffee filled the air. Rowan set down 2 mugs, one before her. To peace, he said simply. She looked at him, this man who'd believed when no one else had, and smiled. Small but true. To peace, she echoed. Outside, thunder rolled again, not in anger this time, but like a promise that the worst had passed. The rain lasted all night. By morning, the air smelled of wet earth and sagebrush. The ranch seemed softer somehow. every fence post glistening, every puddle holding the gray sky like glass. June stood on the porch, watching mist rise from the fields. She had not known peace could sound like this. Just wind, a few cows lowing, and the steady clatter of Rowan's boots as he came from the barn. "Fence held through the storm," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. "Guess the land's tougher than it looks," she smiled faintly. "Like its owner." He chuckled under his breath, a sound she hadn't heard often. "Don't give me too much credit. I've been ready to sell this place more than once. Guess it took someone braver than me to stand firm." She turned to him. "You mean someone too plain to care what people thought?" His eyes softened. "No, June, I mean someone with enough grace to make a man see what really matters." For a long moment neither spoke. The silence between them felt full, not empty, not awkward, just honest. He finally said, "The hands were wondering if you'd teach them to mend their own coats. Figured they owe you for all the ones you patched." June laughed quietly. "That might be a sight. Rowan Tate's cowboys with needles and thread." "They'll do it," he said. "You'd be surprised how fast a man learns when he's got holes in his sleeves." Later that afternoon, she set up a sewing table under the wide awning. The rain had stopped, but drops still fell from the eaves. A few of the ranch hands gathered around, awkward at first, big fingers clumsy with fabric and string. June guided them gently, patiently, and kindly. "Don't pull too tight," she told one. "Let the thread breathe. It'll hold better that way." They listened. They laughed. And soon the bunkhouse yard was full of something that had been missing for a long time. Light-hearted noise. Honest work and the kind of warmth that can't be bought. Rowan watched from a few paces away, arms folded. He saw how the men looked at her now, not as a stranger, not as gossip's target, but as part of the place. Someone who belonged. When the last coat was sewn and the light began to fade, June gathered the scraps of fabric into her basket. Rowan stepped closer, voice low. "June, I've been thinking. You could stay here. I could use someone like you, steady, good-hearted. Not just for the work," she blinked. "Rowan, I don't say things easily," he went on. "Never have. But since you came, the ranch feels alive again. The men eat together and laugh again. I sleep better. You changed more than you know." Her throat tightened. "You don't owe me?" He stopped her with a small shake of his head. "This ain't about owing. It's about seeing. And I see you, June Avery. Clear as day." The sunset poured gold across the wet fields. She looked out toward it, heart trembling between fear and something like joy. "I don't know if I can," she whispered. "Stay, I mean. After all that's been said." Rowan stepped nearer. "Let 'em talk. They'll tire of it. Folks always do. But if you leave, June, they'll win. The ones who said you'd never belong." She looked up at him then. The lines of his face, worn and honest, were softer now. Like a man no longer afraid to hope. The silence stretched again, gentle, expectant. The kind that feels like a held breath before something new begins. That night the sky cleared. Stars spilled across the plains like lanterns hung by God's own hand. The air smelled of mesquite smoke and damp grass. June sat by the fire outside the bunkhouse, her basket of sewing beside her. The men had turned in, their laughter fading into the hum of crickets. Only Rowan stayed awake, leaning against the rail post, his hat tipped back, his eyes watching the flames. For a while, neither spoke. The fire popped softly between them. Finally, June said, "When I first came here, I thought I'd stay a few days. Just long enough to earn enough coin to move on. I never meant to find anything worth staying for." Rowan's gaze lifted to her. "Sometimes what we're looking for ain't out there," he said quietly. "Sometimes it's right here, waiting for us to stop running." She looked down at her hands. The small pricks of needle scars, the faint tremble that still came when she thought of the months before, the ridicule, the whispers, the loneliness. "You think folks will ever forget?" He smiled faintly. "Maybe not. But they'll remember something else first. They'll remember the woman who faced a whole town and never bent." Her eyes shone in the firelight. "That doesn't sound like me." "It is," he said. It's exactly you. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of sage and rain. Somewhere in the dark, a horse whinnied softly. The land felt alive again, washed clean. Rowan took a slow step closer. June, I don't have fancy words or promises. Just this ranch, this fire, and a heart that's steadier when you're near. I'd like you to stay, not as a worker, but as my partner. She met his eyes. Partner? He nodded once. In everything that matters. Tears welled before she could stop them. You really mean that? More than I've meant anything. She hesitated, then set her sewing aside and stood. The firelight painted her face gold, soft against the dark. All my life, she said, people told me I was too plain, too quiet, too forgettable. Maybe I believed them, but you never looked away. He reached for her hand, rough and warm. How could I? The silence between them stretched like a held breath. Then slowly she smiled, the kind of smile that reaches the eyes and changes everything around it. Rowan's chest eased, something deep inside settling like a long-awaited truth. From the bunkhouse, a door creaked open. One of the ranch hands peeked out, then grinned. Evening, Miss June. Boss thought we heard talking. June laughed softly, brushing her sleeve across her eyes. You heard right. Well, the man said, scratching his head. Figured we'd ask if you'd teach our wives to sew like you showed us. Some of 'em are mighty jealous of our stitching. Rowan chuckled. You'll have to schedule lessons, June. You've started a movement. She smiled, light dancing in her eyes. I'd like that. The man tipped his hat and closed the door, leaving the two alone again under the wide, starlit sky. Rowan looked at her, voice gentle. So you'll stay? She nodded slowly. I'll stay. He exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. As dawn began to edge the horizon with pale gold, June spread a few blankets on the porch rail. A small group of ranch hands' wives arrived, laughing softly, carrying baskets of cloth and thread. By the time the sun climbed over the hills, the yard was full of color, fabric fluttering, women talking, the sound of needles pulling through cloth like the rhythm of life starting anew. June's smile lingered as she taught them, her voice calm and sure. Rowan watched from the fence, arms folded, pride plain in his eyes. The town that once mocked her now sent its wives to learn from her hands, and as the wind swept gently through the open fields, June felt the truth of it at last. Grace outlasts gossip, and love, once found, can turn even the loneliest house into home. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Shadow Frontier Tales for more Wild West stories of love, courage, and redemption. Your support helps these tales keep writing on.